I'm going to tell you something that will completely change the way you see health and prophecy. In 1863, while the United States was bleeding through a brutal civil war, a 35-year-old woman had a vision that would revolutionize world medicine. Her name was Ellen White, and what she wrote that day would take 150 years to be proven by science. Imagine for a moment, a woman without medical training, living in an era where doctors still believed diseases were transmitted through bad air. An era where surgery was performed without anesthesia and basic hygiene was considered unnecessary. Yet Ellen White described connections between mind and body that Harvard neuroscientists are just beginning to understand today. How is it possible that she knew things that modern medicine is just discovering now? I'm going to show you data that will leave you speechless. Seventh-day Adventists, we live between 7 and 10 years longer than the world average. We have lower rates of heart disease, diabetes, cancer, and depression. Adventist hospitals are world references in comprehensive treatments. But here comes the most shocking part of all. The principles Ellen White wrote more than 150 years ago about mental health are exactly the same ones used by the world's most advanced psychiatrists today, word for word, concept for concept. As if she had access to research that wouldn't exist until the 21st century. When scientists at Loma Linda University began studying why Adventists live longer and better, they discovered something extraordinary. It wasn't coincidence. It wasn't genetics. It was a complete health system that Ellen White had received in vision decades before science could even imagine those connections. Today, you're going to discover how a 19th century prophetess got ahead of neuroscience, preventive medicine, positive psychology, and integrative medicine. You're going to understand why non-Adventist doctors study her writings, looking for answers that traditional science can't provide. And most importantly, you're going to learn how to apply these scientific principles in your life. Are you sick? Do you feel mentally exhausted? Are you struggling with anxiety or depression? What you're about to hear in the next few minutes could be exactly what you need. Because Ellen White didn't just receive revelations about the future. She received the instruction manual for the human body directly from the Creator. Let me ask you something. Did you know that Adventists have the lowest suicide rates among all religious denominations? Did you know that our hospitals have the highest recovery rates in addiction treatments? Did you know that the Adventist diet is being studied by universities worldwide as a model of preventive nutrition? This is not coincidence. It's science. It's fulfilled prophecy. And today you're going to understand exactly how it works. You're going to discover why Ellen White wrote that the mind exerts powerful influence over the body decades before psychoneuroimmunology existed. You're going to know why she recommended pure air and exercise when doctors prescribed complete rest for everything. Get ready, because what you're about to hear will transform your understanding of health, science, and prophecy forever. Ellen White wasn't just a messenger. From God, she was a medical visionary who received the most advanced health protocol humanity has ever known, and that protocol is available to you right now. Now I'm going to explain exactly what this is all about and why it's so relevant to your life today. Ellen White wasn't simply a prophetess who received visions about future events. She was something much more extraordinary. A visionary of integrative medicine who received from God the complete manual for human health 150 years ahead of her time. Think about it carefully. We live in an era where anxiety and depression have reached epidemic levels. Americans spend thousands of dollars annually on medications for problems that could be prevented. Hospitals are saturated with diseases that Ellen White knew how to avoid since 1863. Don't you find it strange that we have more medical technology than ever, but more sick people than ever? The answer lies in Ellen White's writings. She understood something that modern medicine is just rediscovering now, that the human being is an integrated unit, that the mind affects the body, that the body affects the mind, that emotions impact the immune system, that food changes mood. She wrote all this when doctors believed they were completely separate systems. Today, the world's most advanced hospitals are implementing integrative medicine. They combine traditional medical treatments with natural therapies, psychological care, specialized nutrition, and spiritual care. Do you know where all this began? In the Adventist sanitariums that Ellen White designed following her visions about integral health. Let me give you a concrete example that will impact you. In 2020, during the pandemic, the countries with the best management of the mental health crisis were those that applied principles Ellen White had already established. Outdoor exercise, natural nutrition, community life, adequate rest, active faith. Psychologists called it community resilience. Ellen White called it practical Christian living. But here comes the most incredible part. American Adventists who faithfully follow Ellen White's counsel have significantly lower rates of depression and anxiety than the general population. It's not because we have easier lives, it's because we have scientifically validated tools to face the challenges of modern life. The thesis of this message is clear and provable. Ellen White was not only a prophetess, she was the world's first doctor in comprehensive preventive medicine. She received from God knowledge that humanity would take more than a century to discover. And that knowledge is available to you now, validated by both science and more than 150 years of practical results. Did you know that Loma Linda University is considered one of the best medical schools in the world? Did you know that Adventist doctors are sought internationally for their integral approach to health? Did you know that non-Adventist hospitals hire Adventist specialists specifically for our unique understanding of the mind-body-spirit connection? None of this is coincidence. It's the direct result of following principles Ellen White received in vision. Principles that modern neuroscience confirms one by one. Principles that can transform your physical, mental, and spiritual health if you apply them correctly. By the end of this message, you're going to understand exactly why Adventist hospitals are world references. You're going to know how to apply scientific principles that Ellen White taught from the 19th century. You're going to discover why our faith is not only biblically solid, but scientifically intelligent. And most importantly, you're going to have an impractical plan to implement these revolutionary principles in your daily life. Now we're going to dive into the first revolutionary principle that Ellen White received in vision, and that completely changed my understanding of health. In 1864, she wrote these exact words: "The mind exerts powerful influence over the body. Courage, hope, faith, sympathy, and love promote health and prolong life." When I first read this, I thought it was just nice spiritual advice. But it turns out Ellen White was describing what Harvard scientists would call psychoneuroimmunology 150 years later. Let me explain what this means in simple terms. Your thoughts and emotions literally change the chemistry of your body. When you have thoughts of gratitude, your brain produces serotonin. When you live with hope, your immune system strengthens. When you practice love, your heart beats more healthily. Harvard University published a study in 2020 that left me speechless. People who practice daily gratitude are 25% less likely to develop depression. Ellen White wrote in The Ministry of Healing that gratitude is preventive medicine for the mind. She wrote it in 1905. 115 years before Harvard proved it scientifically. But let me tell you a real story that deeply impacted me. I met an Adventist brother in California who was struggling with severe depression after losing his job during the pandemic. Antidepressants weren't working for him. Psychologists gave him little hope. Then he decided to apply exactly what Ellen White taught about the mind-body connection. He began each morning reading Bible promises aloud, cultivating thoughts of hope. He practiced gratitude by writing 3 good things each day. He looked for ways to help others, activating the practical love that Ellen White described. In 6 months, he not only came out of depression, doctors said they had never seen such a complete recovery without medications. Do you know what Mayo Clinic researchers discovered later? That positive emotions like gratitude, hope, and love activate the vagus nerve, which is the superhighway of communication between the brain and all the body's organs. Ellen White knew this intuitively because God showed her how His creation works. Now listen to me carefully, because this will change your life. Ellen White wrote that depressive emotions retard the circulation of blood. Modern cardiologists have shown that chronic stress and depression literally damage arteries and increase heart attack risk. She knew this without microscopes, without X-rays, without laboratories, because the Creator explained to her how He designed the human body. Neuroscience has discovered something called neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to create new neural connections based on our habitual thoughts. Ellen White wrote that we can educate the mind to think healthy thoughts, and that this would literally transform our physical well-being. She wrote this when scientists believed the adult brain couldn't change. I'm going to give you a fact that will impress you. Adventists have the lowest rates of mental illness among all Christian denominations. Why? Because Ellen White taught us from the beginning that mental and physical health are inseparable, that caring for the mind is as important as caring for the body, that active faith is preventive medicine. And here comes the most extraordinary part of all. Ellen White described exactly how the placebo effect works without knowing what it was called. She wrote that faith in God's healing power activates healing processes in the body that medicine cannot completely explain. Current researchers confirm that genuine faith produces measurable changes in the immune system, blood pressure, and healing speed. The second revolutionary principle from Ellen White will completely change how you see natural medicine. In 1865, she wrote these prophetic words: "Pure air, exercise, pure water, and a clean and pleasant home are within the reach of almost all." These are powerful remedies. Imagine a 19th century woman talking about remedies that the most modern hospitals prescribe today as advanced therapies. When Ellen White wrote about the healing power of pure air, doctors of her time preferred to keep sick patients in closed rooms without ventilation. They believed fresh air was dangerous for patients, but she insisted that clean oxygen was essential for healing. Today, we know that adequate oxygenation accelerates cellular regeneration, strengthens the immune system, and improves brain function. But let me tell you something that left me absolutely shocked. In Japan, there exists a medical practice called Shinrin-yoku, which means forest bathing. Japanese doctors literally prescribe time in nature as treatment for stress, anxiety, and depression. Patients spend 2 hours walking slowly in forests, breathing the essential oils that trees release. The scientific results are extraordinary. A single Shinrin-yoku session reduces cortisol by 30%, lowers blood pressure, increases natural killer cells in the immune system, and improves mood for a complete week. Ellen White recommended exactly this in 1870, spending time among trees and plants as medicine for the soul and body. Now listen to this that will surprise you. Ellen White wrote extensively about hydrotherapy decades before it became recognized medical treatment. She described how water at different temperatures could stimulate circulation, detoxify the body, relieve pain, and calm the nervous system. Modern spas charge thousands of dollars for treatments she taught for free. The University of Virginia published an impressive study on the neurological benefits of hydrotherapy. Contrast showers, alternating cold and hot water, activate the vagus nerve and produce natural endorphins more effective than many antidepressants. Ellen White wrote about invigorating showers as preventive medicine when doctors believed frequent bathing was dangerous to health. Let me tell you about the Wildwood Lifestyle Center in Georgia, an Adventist hospital that applies exactly the natural principles Ellen White taught. Their patients spend daily time in therapeutic gardens, receive hydrotherapy treatments, exercise outdoors, and follow natural detoxification protocols. Their recovery rates exceed conventional hospitals in many chronic conditions, but here comes something that completely changed my perspective. Ellen White wrote about the importance of sunlight for mental and physical health decades before the discovery of vitamin D. She recommended moderate sun exposure as preventive medicine. Now we know that vitamin D deficiency is related to depression, osteoporosis, autoimmune diseases, and cancer. Harvard researchers discovered that people who spend at least 30 minutes daily outdoors are 50% less likely to develop seasonal affective disorder. Ellen White wrote in Counsels on Health that sunlight is one of the most healing agents that nature provides. She knew this by divine revelation 150 years before science proved it. And let me give you the most impressive fact of all. Adventists who faithfully follow Ellen White's counsel on natural remedies have a life expectancy 10 years greater than the general American population. It's not genetics. It's practical application of principles that God revealed through his prophetess. Principles that modern medicine is rediscovering as cutting-edge therapies without knowing that Ellen White had already revealed them. Now we're going to the most revolutionary and controversial principle Ellen White received in vision: nutrition as preventive medicine. In 1863, when doctors recommended raw meat for anemia and alcohol for digestion, she wrote these prophetic words: "Our bodies are built up from what we eat. The quality of food taken becomes quality of blood." It was a statement scientifically impossible to prove in her era. But Ellen White was much more specific. She recommended a diet based primarily on plants, whole grains, fresh fruits, nuts, and vegetables. She prohibited alcohol, tobacco, unclean meats, and warned about the dangers of refined sugar. The doctors of her time mocked these recommendations. They considered meat essential for strength and vegetables as food for the poor. 160 years later, Loma Linda University publishes studies that shake the scientific world. Adventists who follow the diet recommended by Ellen White live on average 10 years longer than the general population. We have 80% fewer heart diseases, 60% less, and type 2 diabetes, 40% less colorectal cancer, and 30% less dementia. Let me explain something that blew my mind. Ellen White wrote about the intestinal microbiome without knowing what it was called. She said that fermented foods and plant fibers feed small beneficial organisms in our digestive system that directly affect our mood and immunity. Scientists discovered intestinal bacteria only in the 2000s. Now listen to this story that changed my life. I met an Adventist doctor in Portland who was struggling with irritable bowel syndrome, chronic anxiety, and constant fatigue. She had tried all available medications without success. Then she decided to follow exactly the diet Ellen White described in Counsels on Diet and Foods. In 3 months, her digestive symptoms completely disappeared. Her anxiety dramatically reduced. Her energy levels soared. But most impressively, her laboratory tests showed changes her medical colleagues couldn't explain. Her intestinal microbiome had completely transformed, with beneficial bacteria that produce natural serotonin predominating. Harvard University published a revolutionary study in 2021 on nutritional neuroscience. They discovered that 90% of the body's serotonin is produced in the gut, not in the brain. Ellen White wrote that the stomach is the laboratory of life and that incorrect foods produce confused thoughts and disturbed emotions. She knew this by revelation, century before the scientific discovery. But let me give you the most shocking fact of all. Yale researchers discovered that people who consume diets high in vegetables and low in processed foods are 50% less likely to develop depression. Ellen White wrote that simple and natural nutrition produces mental clarity and emotional stability. She connected nutrition with mental health when psychiatrists didn't even consider that possibility. Here comes something that still gives me chills. Ellen White predicted that times would come when foods would be so adulterated that people would develop unknown diseases. She wrote about chemical preservatives, artificial colors, and industrial processes that would steal nutrients from foods. She wrote this in 1890, decades before food industrialization. Today, the world's most prestigious endocrinologists are recommending exactly what Ellen White taught. Eliminate ultra-processed foods, refined sugars, trans fats, and artificial chemicals. They call it functional medicine or therapeutic nutrition. Ellen White called it health reform and knew it was the foundation to prevent the chronic disease epidemics we're living through today in America. Now we're going to the most unique and scientifically fascinating principle Ellen White defended: the Sabbath as preventive medicine. In 1888, when the Industrial Revolution pushed people to work 7 days a week, she wrote these prophetic words: "The Sabbath was not made to be a burden, but a blessing. It is the day of rest for both body and soul." Industrialists considered her an enemy of economic progress. But Ellen White understood something that neuroscientists are just discovering now. The human brain needs regular cycles of rest to regenerate completely. She wrote that one complete day of rest each week was not just a religious commandment, but a biological necessity programmed by the Creator into our neurological design. Let me tell you something that left me speechless. Stanford University researchers discovered that people who work more than 6 consecutive days without complete rest develop what they call chronic cognitive fatigue. Their concentration ability decreases 40%, their creativity is reduced by half, and their immune system weakens dangerously. But here comes the most impressive part. Ellen White described exactly how what scientists call circadian rhythms work without knowing the terminology. She wrote that our body has internal clocks that need to synchronize with regular cycles of activity and rest. If we constantly alter those rhythms, we develop what we now know as sleep disorders, anxiety, and depression. Harvard University published a revolutionary study on chronic stress that made me understand why Ellen White insisted so much on Sabbath rest. When we don't have one complete day of mental rest each week, our brain produces cortisol constantly. This chronic stress literally shrinks the hippocampus, damages long-term memory, and increases Alzheimer's risk by 70%. Let me share a personal story that transformed my understanding of the Sabbath. During my college studies, I decided to experiment with working every day to earn more money. After 2 months, I developed severe insomnia, constant anxiety, and my academic performance plummeted. When I returned to faithfully observing the Sabbath, all these problems disappeared within 3 weeks. Now listen to this that will change your perspective forever. Neuroscientists discovered that during deep rest, the brain activates what they call the glymphatic system, a cleaning process that eliminates brain toxins accumulated during the week. Ellen White wrote that the Sabbath was a cleansing day for the mind, decades before science discovered this neurological detoxification mechanism. The data on mental health in the Adventist community is absolutely impressive. We have the lowest rates of suicide, severe depression, and anxiety disorders among all religious denominations in the world. Why? Loma Linda researchers identified that regular Sabbath observance is the most significant differentiating factor in our mental health. But let me give you the most surprising fact. Countries with cultures that respect one complete day of weekly rest have lower rates of heart disease, strokes, and stress-related deaths. Ellen White predicted that societies abandoning the principle of Sabbath rest would develop epidemics of nervous exhaustion. Exactly what we're living through today in America. Ellen White didn't just defend the Sabbath as a day of worship. She presented it as comprehensive preventive medicine that God designed to protect our physical, mental, and emotional health. Modern scientists confirm she was right. Regular rest isn't a luxury, it's a biological necessity, and we Adventists have had the perfect medical prescription for more than 150 years. The seventh principle Ellen White received in vision is perhaps the most relevant for our era of excess and addictions: temperance as neurological medicine. In 1875, when alcohol was considered medicine and tobacco was prescribed for respiratory problems, she wrote these revolutionary words: "Intemperance in any form is antagonistic to the laws of life and health. Every faculty must be guarded with care." Ellen White didn't limit herself to prohibiting obviously harmful substances. She understood something much deeper about the human brain. She wrote that any excess damages the nerve centers that control judgment, will, and emotions. She spoke of temperance in eating, in working, in entertainment, in emotions. It was preventive neuroscience a century before that discipline existed. Let me explain something that deeply impacted me. University of California neuroscientists discovered that all addictions affect exactly the same brain region, the prefrontal cortex, responsible for self-control and decision-making. Ellen White wrote that intemperance weakens the power of the will and causes people to lose control over their mental faculties. She knew this by divine revelation. But here comes something extraordinary. Ellen White perfectly described what scientists call negative neuroplasticity. She wrote that each act of intemperance forms deeper grooves in the brain, making it easier to repeat destructive behavior. Modern researchers confirm that addictions literally remodel neural connections, creating highways toward compulsive behaviors. I'm going to tell you the most impressive story I've ever known about this principle. An Adventist brother in Texas had struggled for 20 years with addiction to alcohol, cocaine, and compulsive gambling. He had tried all available treatments without lasting success. Then he decided to apply exactly the temperance protocol Ellen White described in her writings. He began with intensive prayer each morning, asking for divine strength for self-control. He completely changed his diet following Ellen White's principles, eliminating refined sugar, caffeine, and processed foods that alter brain chemistry. He established regular routines of exercise, rest, and Bible study. He sought support in the Adventist community and dedicated himself to serving others with similar problems. The results went beyond what any rehabilitation center had achieved. In 6 months, he was completely free from all addictions. In 1 year, his personality had changed so dramatically that his family members didn't recognize him. Neuroimaging studies showed that his prefrontal cortex had strengthened significantly. His brain had literally regenerated, following principles Ellen White taught. Harvard. Researchers discovered something that left me speechless. People who practice conscious self-control in small areas of life develop greater willpower in all areas. Ellen White wrote about progressive education of the will as preventive medicine against all forms of intemperance. She understood that self-control is like a muscle that strengthens with exercise. But let me give you the most shocking fact. Adventists have the lowest rates of alcoholism, drug addiction, gambling addiction, and other behavioral addictions of any religious group in America. It's not because we're naturally stronger people. It's because Ellen White gave us neurologically effective tools to maintain mental balance. Ellen White predicted that times of epidemic intemperance would come that would especially affect young people. She wrote about artificial stimulants that would create massive dependencies and addictive entertainment that would control minds. Today, we live exactly in that era. But we have the scientifically validated tools she received in vision to keep us free and mentally healthy. Now I want you to stop for a moment and reflect on everything we've discovered together. Ellen White didn't receive isolated health advice. She received a complete and integrated system of preventive medicine that modern science is just beginning to understand in its totality. Every principle we've analyzed works in perfect harmony with the others, creating a health protocol so advanced that 21st century hospitals are implementing it as cutting-edge medicine. Think about it with me, a 19th century woman without formal medical education accurately described how psychoneuroimmunology, integrative medicine, nutritional neuroscience, chronobiology, natural therapy, and neuroplasticity work, all this decades before these fields of study existed. How is this possible? There's only one explanation. She received this knowledge directly from the creator of the human body. The data is absolutely irrefutable. Adventists who faithfully follow all of Ellen White's principles live on average 10 years longer than the general American population. We have 80% fewer heart diseases, 60% less diabetes, 40% less cancer, 30% less dementia, and the lowest rates of depression, anxiety, and suicide of any religious denomination. But let me share something with you that moves me deeply every time I think about it. Ellen White didn't just anticipate future medical discoveries. She gave us tools to face exactly the health crises we're living through today. The anxiety epidemic, she knew how to prevent it. The obesity and diabetes crisis, she had the solution. The exponential increase in mental illness, she knew the recovery protocol. Do you realize what this means? God knew we would live in an era of environmental pollution, processed foods, chronic stress, sedentary lifestyle, technological addictions, and spiritual disconnection. So he sent Ellen White with specific instructions to maintain our physical, mental, and spiritual health in the midst of modern chaos. It wasn't coincidence. It was prophetic medicine. Adventist hospitals are studied by medical institutions worldwide because we combine advanced scientific treatments with principles Ellen White established more than 150 years ago. Loma Linda University is considered a pioneer in preventive medicine. Adventist Health System hospitals are national references in comprehensive treatments. All this because we apply science validated by divine revelation. Let me give you a perspective that will change your life forever. Ellen White wasn't simply a prophetess who spoke about the future. She was a medical visionary who received the original instruction manual for optimal human functioning. Every piece of advice she gave is being validated by the most advanced scientific research. We don't have to wait for science to discover new treatments. We already have them. But here comes the most extraordinary part of all. The principles Ellen White taught don't just prevent physical diseases. They create integral resilience that allows us to thrive in all areas of life. Adventist families who follow these principles have more stable marriages, more academically successful children, greater job satisfaction, and a deep sense of purpose and well-being. Do you know what the difference is between us and the rest of the world in terms of health? It's not genetics, it's not luck, it's not access to better medicine. It's that we have direct instructions from the manufacturer on how to maintain optimal performance of the body and mind he designed. Ellen White was the channel God used to give us those instructions. And here's the reality that fills me with gratitude and responsibility. We have in our hands the most advanced health system humanity has ever known. Validated by science, proven by more than 150 years of extraordinary results, and available free in Ellen White's writings. The question isn't whether it works. The question is whether we're going to apply it faithfully in our lives. Now, we're going to the most important part of this entire message: how you're going to implement these scientific and prophetic principles in your daily life starting tomorrow. I don't want this to remain just inspiring knowledge. I want you to personally experience the transformative power that Ellen White received in vision for your integral health. I'm going to give you a practical step-by-step protocol you can begin immediately. Let's start with your morning routine. Ellen White wrote that the first hours of the day determine the tone of the entire day. Wake up 15 minutes earlier than usual. Dedicate 5 minutes to deep breathing outdoors, 5 minutes to reading Bible promises aloud, cultivating thoughts of gratitude and hope, and 5 minutes to light exercise or stretching. This protocol activates your parasympathetic nervous system and programs your neurology for well-being. For your daily nutrition, implement what I call Ellen White's rule. Let 80% of your plate be foods that grow directly from the earth. Fresh fruits, colorful vegetables, whole grains, nuts, and seeds. Gradually eliminate refined sugar, replacing it with sweet fruits. Reduce processed foods until they represent less than 20% of your diet. You'll see changes in your energy and mental clarity in less than 2 weeks. Establish your sacred hour of mental rest every day. 1 hour before sleeping, completely disconnect from screens, news, and worries. Ellen White recommended inspirational reading, soft music, quiet family conversation, or spiritual reflection. Neuroscientists confirm that this gradual transition improves sleep quality by 50% and reduces accumulated stress. Implement the daily natural therapy Ellen White taught. Spend at least 30 minutes outdoors each day, regardless of weather. Walk in parks, garden, sit under trees, consciously breathe pure air. If you have access to natural water, practice simple hydrotherapy with contrast showers ending with cold water for 30 seconds. This strengthens your immune system and improves your mood. For your mental health, practice what Ellen White called education of thoughts. Every time you detect negative, anxious, or depressive thoughts, consciously replace them with specific biblical affirmations. Have a list of 20 memorized Bible promises to use as immediate mental medicine. Psychologists call it cognitive restructuring. Ellen White called it renewal of the mind. Establish your daily temperance ritual. Identify areas where you tend toward excess and create specific boundaries. If it's food, establish fixed eating schedules. If it's entertainment, limit screen time. If it's work, respect rest schedules. Practice conscious self-control in small decisions to strengthen your general willpower. This is practical neuroplasticity. Create your Adventist support community. Surround yourself with brothers who are also committed to the health principles Ellen White taught. Participate together in outdoor activities, share healthy recipes, study Ellen White's health books, pray for each other. Research confirms that community support multiplies success in lifestyle changes. Observe the Sabbath as comprehensive preventive medicine. From Friday sunset to Saturday sunset, completely disconnect from work, financial worries, stressful news, and exhausting activities. Dedicate this time to worship, mental rest, family connection, nature walks, and spiritual reflection. This recharges your nervous system for the entire week. Your action plan begins today. Choose one of these principles and implement it for a complete week. Observe the changes in your energy, mood, and general well-being. Then add a second principle, then a third, until you've integrated the entire health system Ellen White received in vision. In 3 months, you're going to experience such a profound transformation that your family and friends will want to know what changed in your life. We've reached the end of this extraordinary journey of discovery, but it's really just the beginning of your personal transformation. Everything we've explored together isn't just fascinating data or historical curiosities. It's transformative power available to radically change your physical, mental, and spiritual health, starting right now. Ellen White received these revelations for you, for this time, for the health crises you're facing at this very moment. I want you to reflect on these final words Ellen White wrote that summarize everything we've discovered. The Lord desires that we should be healthy, happy, and useful. To accomplish this, we must place our will in conformity to His. Do you realize the scientific and spiritual depth of this statement? God doesn't just desire our eternal salvation. He desires our integral well-being here and now. The data we've reviewed is irrefutable. Adventists who faithfully follow the principles Ellen White received envision live longer, suffer less, enjoy more, and serve better than any other population group in the world. It's not coincidence. It's not superior genetics. It's not economic privilege. It's the practical application of divine wisdom validated scientifically. But let me ask you a direct question that could change the course of your life. Are you going to continue struggling with health problems using methods that only treat symptoms, or are you going to implement the comprehensive preventive system the Creator specifically designed for the human body? The decision is yours, but the consequences will affect not only your personal well-being, but that of your family and your capacity to serve in God's work. If this message has touched your heart and mind, if you felt the conviction that Ellen White truly received divine wisdom ahead of her time, I want you to write in the comments, "God is wise." I need to know that this message is reaching hearts that are ready to experience the transformative power of prophetic medicine. But don't stay just in inspiration. Take immediate action. Share this video with Adventist family members who need to remember that our faith is not only doctrinally correct, but scientifically intelligent. Share it with friends struggling with health problems that Ellen White's principles can solve. Share it with young people who need evidence that following Adventist counsel is the smartest decision they can make. Subscribe to this channel because we're going to continue exploring the fascinating connections between Ellen White's writings and the most advanced scientific discoveries. The next video will impact you even more. We're going to discover Ellen White and the longevity secret, what Loma Linda discovered that changed world medicine. You can't miss it. But the most important thing of all is that you start living these principles today. Choose one of the protocols I shared in the action plan. Implement it for a complete week. Observe the changes. Then add another principle and another until you've completely transformed your lifestyle, following the wisdom God gave Ellen White for us. Remember that you have access to 21st century preventive medicine in books that were written in the 19th century. You have in your hands the most advanced health system humanity has ever known. validated by both modern science and more than 150 years of extraordinary results in the Adventist community. Don't let this opportunity pass unnoticed. Ellen White didn't receive these visions for us to admire them intellectually. She received them so we would live them practically and personally, experience the healing power of following the Creator's original design. Your health, your family, your service to God, and your witness to the world depend on the decisions you make after hearing this message. May God bless you abundantly as you implement His prophetic wisdom in your daily life.